So a lot of companies get stuck at some point. Sometimes that's, you're at $1 million in revenue. Sometimes you're at $2 million in revenue. In my own experience, I've gotten stuck before at $2 million and in a different company at $3 million and actually even between 4 and 5. So multiple places on the journey from 1 to say 10 million in ARR, you find yourself stuck. You hit a growth plateau. And so wanted to get into that. What is that growth plateau? Well, actually, as we'll see, it's really a churn wall. And so how does that work? And so this is actually how growth works at most companies. It's not a straight line. It's actually a series of linked growth phases. The other interesting thing is that growth is actually linear initially because you've got your sales motion or even your marketing motion if it's more PLG, and you have a certain amount of leads coming in, a certain close ratio or win ratio where you're converting those leads into customers, and that tends to happen at a linear rate. Now, there are times, maybe you have a viral moment, maybe there's, some other things that can happen that can cause it to spike upwards. But generally speaking, for most companies, it tends to there'll be a linear pace. And it might even be a very steep linear pace, but it's still a linear pace. That's your sales or your close rate. And so you see that illustrated there. But what you then see as you start to see it slope off, well, what's causing that? So the unfortunate math is that churn operates as a percentage of the total number of clients, because at any given point in time, say you have 100 clients. Well, of that 100 clients, let's say the bottom 10% in terms of their satisfaction, that's your most likely to churn group. And then maybe you've got, the bottom 20% or like the 10% above that, still very likely to churn, and so on. So churn happens as a percentage of your customer base. And so when your customer base is, say, 10 clients, then there may actually, if only 10% of your clients are, unhappy, then that's just one firm. When you get to 100, that's 10 firms. So why does that matter, that scaling? Well, it matters because if sales is a linear process, where let's say you're bringing in 10 sales a month, right? Well, you'll get to a point where your churn as a percentage of your client base equals 10 churns a month. So you get to this flat area here where sales equals churn. This is where you plateau. So that's what I call the churn wall. When you've hit this wall where, say, you have, in some cases, it may be at 100 clients, it may even be a lower number, but maybe it's 1,000 clients. Take that 1,000 client example. Say you're closing 10 per month and you have 1,000 clients today. Well, if your annual churn is, say, 10%, which is quite good, then out of 1,000 clients, that means you're going to churn 100 in any given year, right? Which is just a little inside 10 a month, call it 8 to 9 a month, right? And so you're churning that, but you're selling 10 new. So you can see how much your net sales increase has decreased. It's down to like 2 per month. And if you get just a little bit bigger, you get up to, say, something like 1,200 clients. Well, then 120 churning per year, that's 10 a month. You are literally at zero growth at that point. And it's kind of asymptotic, meaning you slope off as you're getting there and you start to feel your growth slow down until you hit the plateau, or you just get to the growth slowdown and you realize, holy crap, we're getting stuck here. We need to do something about this. And so, what we'll talk about next is what are the different levers you can use. Say you're getting close to, or you feel like you're hitting that churn wall. What are the levers that you can use to break out and to get to the next phase of growth and the next phase of growth beyond that?